People think marriages fall apart because of one catastrophic event: an affair, a betrayal, a fight so big it leaves the relationship in ruins. But for me, my marriage didn't end with one event. It was a slow unraveling, thread by thread, until one day I looked at my husband and realized I didn't recognize him anymore. And by then, it was too late. He had gambled away our future, destroyed my trust, and thrown my love aside like it meant nothing. The moment I left him, I felt free, but the path that got me there was nothing short of a nightmare. I still remember the first time I saw a crack in the foundation of my marriage. It was subtle, almost invisible. My husband was charming, attentive, and ambitious. He was the kind of man who walked into a room and made everyone feel like they were the most important person in the world. And I fell for him. Hard. When we got married, I thought I was the luckiest woman alive. I was wrong. It started with his sister, Angela. She was always in trouble: bad relationships, missed opportunities, money problems. Angela had a way of turning every situation into a catastrophe, and somehow, my husband was always there to clean up her messes. I told myself it was admirable. Family is important after all. But as the years went by, I realized Angela wasn't just reckless. She was selfish, manipulative, and worst of all, a liar. One night, Angela showed up at our house, crying and clutching a suitcase. Her boyfriend had kicked her out, she said. She had nowhere to go. Of course, my husband didn't hesitate to let her stay with us. I agreed at first. What else could I do? But days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months. Angela didn't just stay with us, she took over. She treated our home like her personal playground, coming and going at all hours, leaving a trail of chaos in her wake. And my husband, he let her. I tried to talk to him about it, to tell him how her presence was affecting me, but every time I brought it up, he dismissed my concerns. She's family, he'd say. She just needs time to get back on her feet. But Angela wasn't getting back on her feet. She was dragging us down with her. The breaking point came one evening when I overheard a phone call Angela was having in the kitchen. She was laughing, talking about some man she'd been seeing behind her boyfriend's back, the same boyfriend who had supposedly kicked her out. My stomach turned as I realized she wasn't the victim she'd made herself out to be. She was cheating, lying, and manipulating everyone around her. And my husband? He was enabling her. When I told him what I'd overheard, I thought he'd finally see reason. I thought he'd confront her, set some boundaries, maybe even ask her to leave. But instead, he defended her. He said she was going through a rough time, and that I was being judgmental. Judgmental. That word stung like a slap in the face. I wasn't being judgmental, I was being realistic. But he refused to see it. He chose her over me. Things only got worse from there. Around the same time, I started noticing strange charges on our bank statements, large withdrawals and transfers I didn't recognize. When I confronted my husband about it, he brushed it off, saying he was just moving some money around. But the numbers didn't add up. And when I pressed him, the truth finally came out. He'd been gambling. Gambling. My heart sank as he told me he'd been betting on sports, convinced he could turn a quick profit. But it wasn't just a harmless hobby. He'd emptied our savings account, wiped out the money we'd been putting aside for a house, for our future. Gone. Just like that. I was furious. How could he be so reckless, so irresponsible? He swore it wouldn't happen again, promised he'd stop, but I didn't believe him. Not after what he'd done. And deep down, I knew this wasn't just about the gambling. It was about trust. And he had shattered mine. As if things couldn't get any worse, Angela was still living with us, completely oblivious to the tension she was causing. Or maybe she wasn't oblivious. Maybe she just didn't care. One afternoon, I walked into the living room to find her sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone, as if she didn't have a care in the world. "Do you have any plans to move out?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. She looked up at me, surprised. "Why would I move out? I thought you and my brother liked having me here. I wanted to scream. How could she be so clueless? But before I could respond, my husband walked in, cutting the conversation short. Is there a problem? He asked, his tone defensive. Yes, I said, my voice trembling with anger. There is a problem. Your sister is treating this house like a hotel, and you're letting her. Angela scoffed, rolling her eyes. Oh, please, don't be so dramatic. That was it. That was the moment I realized I couldn't do this anymore. I couldn't keep fighting a battle I was destined to lose. My husband had made his choice, and it wasn't me. I started thinking about leaving, really leaving, but the thought terrified me. How could I walk away from a marriage I'd invested so much in? How could I give up on the life I'd built with him? But the more I thought about it, the more I realized I wasn't giving up. I was saving myself. Because staying with him wasn't just hurting me, it was destroying me. The final straw came when I discovered he'd given Angela money, our money, to pay off a debt she'd racked up with her cheating boyfriend. I found the transfer on our bank statement clear as day. When I confronted him, he didn't even deny it. He just looked at me as if he couldn't understand why I was so upset. She's my sister, he said, as if that justified everything. And I'm your wife, I shot back. Or does that not matter to you anymore? He didn't answer. And in that moment, I knew. I knew I was done. Leaving wasn't easy. It took weeks of planning, of quietly gathering my things and making arrangements. I didn't tell him I was going. I didn't owe him that. The day I walked out of that house, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. For the first time in years, I felt free. But freedom came with its own challenges. Starting over wasn't easy. I had to rebuild my life from the ground up, piece by piece. But every step I took, every small victory I achieved, reminded me that I'd made the right choice, that I was stronger than I'd ever given myself credit for. My husband tried to reach out, of course. He called, he texted, he even showed up at my new apartment once, begging me to come back. But I didn't. Because I knew that if I went back, nothing would change. He'd still be the man who gambled away our future, who chose his cheating sister over his wife. And I deserved better than that. Now looking back, I don't regret leaving him. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, but it was also the best decision I've ever made. Because I finally realized my worth. I finally put myself first, and I'll never settle for less again.